O'clock. I'll ask our city clerk to please call roll.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Mr. Greg David,
Present.
Mr. Tyler Dean is absent. Miss Emily Hamburg,
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Here.
and Mr. John Welch.
Present.
And you have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. I do see on our agenda we have Father Terry Hedrick from Church of the Resurrection here to lead us in opening prayer. And he's not here, so we will take a moment of silent prayer. Amen. All, if you'll please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have one proclamation this evening for Veterans Day, which I'll now read. To the citizens of Bel Aire, Kansas, greetings. Whereas Veterans Day has its origins in the November 11th, 1918 armistice, which brought World War I to a conclusion, and whereas the Allied victory in World War I affirmed the strength of great nations acting together for high purpose, and whereas the people of the United States caused through their elected representatives the designating of November 11th as a federal legal holiday, which in 1954 became officially known as Veterans Day. And whereas Veterans Day continues to be celebrated and commemorated with solemn observances in honor of all Americans who have served their country in times of war and conflict, and whereas the courage, honor, sacrifice, and dedication which veterans of the United States Armed Forces have displayed in the cause of justice, freedom, and democracy are most worthy of recognition. Now, therefore, I, Justin Smith, on behalf of Mayor Jim Benage, do hereby call upon all citizens to commend America's veterans and observe with solemn pride November 11th, 2022 to be celebrated as Veterans Day. All right, next item on the agenda is to determine agenda additions. Are there any agenda additions this evening? All right. Seeing no agenda additions, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains the minutes of the October 18th council meeting. Also included is the acceptance of a water main petition for Homestead Senior Living, as well as the subsequent resolution. If there are any questions, Kevin Cowan with Gilmore and Bell can answer those. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr.
Mr. President, I'll motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the council president or the mayor to sign.
Second.
A first by Councilmember Welch and a second by Councilmember Hamburg. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The vote passes 4-0. The next item is the discussion and approval of appropriations ordinance. This reporting period included $85,000 in capital projects, $35,000 for new police computers that were ordered a year ago, $135,000 in Wichita Water and CCUA debt, as well as O&M payments. Are there any questions of staff?
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember Hamburg?
I make a motion to accept appropriations ordinance 22-20.
I'll second.
A first and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Next item is city requested appearances. We have Rosemary Wood, who is a Bel Aire resident, here to share about Nonprofit Go. Please join us at the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Council President and the board and council members. I'm here this time a little less stressed than last time. Sorry about that. I switched my my paradigm on what I was going to speak, but I am really happy to be here to introduce to you where I work, and it's called Nonprofit Go. And our mission is to mentor and educate nonprofit organizations to help them achieve sustainability, build capacity, and enhance their quality of community service. And I'm really excited that our founder and executive director is here because she could present it a lot better than I can. And it's just a short introduction. We're here to just mainly let you know who we are, what we're doing, and how it's benefited the Wichita area and the county. So here is Vicki Klein, our executive director. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time this evening. As Rosemarie said, just to tell you a little bit about Nonprofit Go, we have a very short slide presentation, but it's always good to see faces and know who you're working with. But Nonprofit Go was established in 2018 with 5 clients, and we started out as a grant writing business. It has grown and developed from there to be nonprofit services in general. So again, we started with 5 clients in 2018. Today, we're serving 100 clients in 10 states. So we've really continued to expand our services. And as you can see, there are 6 of us on staff now, all working together to help the nonprofit community. And as I said, we started with grant writing, basically to help organizations find funding and to help them obtain that funding. I have a background in finance and accounting. It became obvious very quickly that smaller organizations don't have or didn't always have the financial reports and some of the things they needed to apply for grant funding. So it was a nice combination of services to be able to provide accounting work for them and then be able to write the grants. As we continued to work, we had more requests for different services, such as nonprofit startups, helping organizations obtain their 501c3. We became a fiscal sponsor organization where individuals or groups that don't yet have their nonprofit status can apply for funding through Nonprofit Go. I think I'll just go on here. One of our goals and kind of a vision we have for Nonprofit Go is to be a voice in the community to help everybody understand that nonprofits are small businesses. And this is the model that we work under, that when we begin to work with an organization, we are very interested in helping them build that small business model. And to, I think nonprofit directors very often have a strong passion for what they do, but they tend to overlook that business side. So we really work with organizations to help them improve that piece of what they do. So we're on a mission here to try to bring those two communities together, the nonprofit organizations and the small business community. One question we're asked very often is, how does Nonprofit Go differ from the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber or the Association of Kansas Nonprofits? The difference is those organizations are referral or resource organizations. And when a nonprofit goes to them for help, they get a lot of resources that they can use. When they come to Nonprofit Go, we have people on staff that can do the accounting work, that can write the grants, that can do all of these services, consultation work. So we're becoming kind of a one-stop shop where we're working to fill in the gaps that nonprofits often see in services. We Nonprofit Go itself is a nonprofit organization. And so we can apply for grant funding to subsidize the fees that we charge to our clients. In doing so, our clients get quality services for a very low fee or rate. And again, we want them to be able to afford these services. So that was very intentional on our part to make the fees very low. I always tell people too that we are very hesitant to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is our plan, because it changes every day depending on the organization we're working with. Depending on what they need from us, we kind of morph and develop and help them with those issues or concerns. We're excited that in January, we are partnering with the Wichita Community Foundation to launch a nonprofit certification program. So again, with the idea that we want to help organizations have a strong foundation from the beginning and be able to understand what it really takes to operate and manage a nonprofit organization. So we're excited for that to happen. Just a few little facts. In 2021, we raised officially over $6 million in grant funding, but a little over 5 million of that was in COVID relief funding. So we don't really count that because we think it's non-renewable, probably not going to happen again. So our funding for the year was a little over 685,000. At this point, as of September 30th of 2022, we have infused over $1 million into the local nonprofit community. And we are proud of that fact because it helps with business development, with economic development. Those are dollars that are coming from all over the United States into Wichita and the surrounding areas. And we have about 55% of our applications that we write are funded. And on a national scale, that's a good return. So we're proud of that as well. And again, I already talked about this, of how we are different from some of the other organizations. Again, just that when you come to us for services, we're not going to send you someplace else. We're going to help you right there with whatever it is that you need. Okay, that's just kind of a brief intro. So I don't know if there are questions, or Rosemarie, if you have anything to add.
No, just that we wanted to introduce ourselves to the city of Bel Aire and let everybody know who we are. We're here to help our nonprofit sector. And I'm so excited to be not only a resident, but employed. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. We appreciate it. All right, the next section on the agenda, we have citizens' concerns. If you would, when I call you up to the podium, if you would please speak your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. First on the agenda is Carolyn Gunzelman.
Hello again. Carolyn Gunselman. I live at 5029 East 39th Street. I am here this evening in regards to the letter that we received from the mayor about a task force for our roads in our neighborhood. I have a couple of things. I kind of was hoping to address the mayor, but he's not here tonight. In the first paragraph, he says, we still do not have a clear consensus as to the desires of the citizens of our neighborhood. And I want to point out that everyone in our neighborhood knew that they had to return the petition for a yes vote, and that 51% had to vote yes to pave the roads, and that threshold was not met. So we have a consensus. We have to assume that the property owners who didn't respond either don't care or don't want the roads paved, or they would have signed the petition and returned it. If an election is decided by one vote, do we say we don't have a consensus? No, we all know the rules. If you don't vote, you don't have a say. If you don't have the majority of votes, you lose. As far as the task force that the mayor would like to form, was suggested at the last meeting that there be a citizen group formed to talk about, work through, get everybody together, come with, as a neighborhood, to come to some ideas that we could then present to the council. I feel like a task force maybe isn't warranted yet. Let us get our feet wet. Let us talk to each other. Let us build our community, work with each other. I certainly don't know that it's warranted to hire an engineering firm to come to those meetings at the cost of $19,500. Especially when a lot of the discussion for a lot of those meetings is going to be on a very low introductory level. I don't see the point of paying an engineer to sit in on those meetings. And I would encourage you guys to vote no for that. And task force, I'm not sure the purpose of it being a task force rather than a citizens group, except for that then the members that sit on it are limited and appointed by the mayor rather than come together as a group on our own. Thank you.
Thank you. The second card I have is for Melanie Penner.
Good evening. I'm Melanie Penner, 4100 North Baton Street, Aurora Park Edition, City of Bel Aire. My husband Ron and I have lived there since 1991, which is 31 years. In my address this evening, the word we or our means Ron and myself. The word you pertains to City Council. Unfortunately, we were out of town October 18th. In fact, we left about the 12th, 13th. Our mail stopped on October 13th. I think the letter we received from Mayor was dated October 13th. So we weren't aware of what was going to transpire here on October 18th. And as you are all well aware, maybe except Emily, we are sick and tired of the gravel road, street, and dust. Our reply, August 15th, to the paving petition that was mailed and postmarked July 6th to the Aurora Park residents was, my husband and I are for paved streets, but not in favor of the petition. So our conclusion was we want paved streets. Main thing on the petition was the dollar amount listed there, with this being the inflation year of all years, and only one quote. We weren't willing to sign the petition, but we do vote for paved streets. We were very disappointed when we read the letter dated October 24th, 2022, we received from Mayor Benage. Unfortunately, he's not here, that the City Council voted 3-2 to deny moving forward with the paving and to formally create an Aurora Park Gravel Roads Task Force. We and you have spent the last several years discussing this same issue. A few questions to the proposed Aurora Park Gravel Roads Task Force. How much time is going to be involved? How many dollars spent drawing up the task force document and the agreement with Garver? How many dollars for the road materials, and who pays? Who does the maintenance? What equipment will be necessary for the maintenance? Who pays the qualified personnel to perform the required maintenance? our roads/streets today, before any road materials are addressed,
Excuse me, you are at 3 minutes. If you could please conclude your comments.
okay, before any road materials are addressed, there are streets that need to be flattened out with minimal crown, widening in some areas so two-way traffic exists, and the intersection of 40th, Harding, and Batten needs the huge camel bump cut way down. We are back to square one.
Thank you for those comments.
Hello.
I think I hear that our mayor maybe has been able to join via Zoom.
Yeah.
Can you hear us,
I think
Mr.
I
Mayor?
have.
All right. Well, as a point of order, our mayor wasn't able to join us in person, but was attempting to call in for providing comment via Zoom. And I hope we'll be able to get him on the projector if the technology works. And since he's not here in person, I'll continue to run the meeting and ask the mayor to comment as he's able to.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the council member reports. I'll start with Councilmember Hamburg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quick, I just want to say thank you to everybody that participated in Halloween last night. Our 4 kids enjoyed it. I don't want to see the bill some of you are spending on your Halloween decorations, but we sure enjoyed them. And everybody, as far as I saw, drove safely, so I appreciated that. I did attend Coffee with the Mayor on October 22nd and had a handful of citizens attend that. It's a great time to talk more casually. The last thing I would mention is that Saturday, November 12th, the Lions Club is having their annual Taste of Italy dinner from 4 to 7. It's a great way to support that organization. It's a big fundraiser for them. And I would just encourage citizens to attend that. Thank you.
Councilmember Welch.
The only thing I've got of concern is to remind everybody to vote, get out and vote.
Councilmember David.
Ditto on the vote, and I was fortunate to have no line today, but thank you for all the poll workers out there.
All right, and I do have a brief report on attending the Chisholm Creek Utility Authority meeting on October 27th. Discussed a number of issues at that meeting, including some odor control options for the Bel Aire midpoint, which is kind of the high point between the city of Bel Aire and the treatment facility, which is located in Park City. There's a perpetual issue of odor coming out of that midpoint. So we've been reviewing options for reducing that odor with various carbon filtration systems. And I think we've determined that there is a system of carbon-filled buckets that can be implemented at a relatively low cost to improve the outcomes for the neighbors in that area. Also had a decent amount of discussion on the sequencing batch reactor number 3. We've been spending quite a bit of money on that reactor over the past few months, trying to adjust some things that were designed wrong with it initially, where the load of treating the wastewater continues to break the agitator in that reactor and causes a lot of work for that plant. There's been a variety of issues with that, with the latest being that during that repair, the contractor had the wrong size pipe and wasn't able to complete the repair. And so they did the best that they could and put it back together. And our plant manager believes it'll hold for a number of years, but it isn't actually the result that we paid for or we're looking to get. And so there will need to be future maintenance on that reactor. We took a variety of actions as we now have Tony, our new plant manager, installed as the plant manager to put him on a number of documents and give him the authorities of the plant manager position, and then proceeded with some routine maintenance on a couple of the water wells in Bel Aire. And that concludes my report on the CCUA meeting. I'll ask the mayor for his report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a couple things I'd like to talk about, actually a number of things. But first of all, November 11th is Veterans Day, so I do want to thank all veterans for their service to our nation and protecting our freedoms. October 20th, I did visit with the Boy Scout troop of 585. They wanted to know about our bike path pedestrian policy. So I briefly reviewed the policy we adopted on October 1st of 2019 and told them of our plans for bike routes on 53rd between Oliver and Woodlawn, that we are preparing a proposal to complete the sidewalk between Central Park and Isley, that woodlawn between 37th and 45th will have a 10-foot bike path on the west side and a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side. We are also considering resurfacing a project for Oliver from 37th to 53rd that will include on-street bike lane on both sides of the street. So we are in the very early stages of design work on the 45th Street from Oliver to Woodlawn, which would include sidewalks, bike paths. Lastly, that WAMPO has put together a regional area bike path plan that incorporates our Bel Aire's bike ped plan. So WAMPO is working towards a regional active transportation plan in the 2023 to 2024 timeframe. I did hold a coffee with the mayor on October 22nd. I do appreciate the citizens that showed up for that. It was a good time to interact with citizens. No big issues came up, but we had a nice talk and met some new friends. On October 24th, I met shortly with the tree board, discussed resources for best grasses to use in this area. One member is very involved with K-State Extension and has provided me with some resource links that K-State recommends. So I'll be talking with Ty about and our city manager about how we might utilize that information. On October 27th, I attended the Cheetah Creek Utility Authority Board meeting as well as Council President Justin Smith, and I think also Council Member Greg David was there. Some additional items that were discussed: the wastewater effluent remains within the KDHE permit requirements for the second month in a row. This is in spite of the fact that the effluent is still high, so that we still need some work to do on that. We did start a testing program. The tests have been pulled, samples have been pulled, and are now being analyzed. So we'll see how that comes out. But the crew at CCUA is doing an excellent job at managing the wastewater treatment to keep the CCA plant compliant, which is very good. We also learned that a business wants to use some of the CCA property for driveway access and possible semi-truck parking. That is being reviewed for feasibility. And we also learned that the EPA is working on a project not related to CCA, where they would like CCUA to take potable water for their project. The TAC will be discussing the proposal and making recommendations for moving forward. This has potential to be an additional water source for the CCUA. On October 27th, I also attended the legislative dinner at Newton. That was several local elected people were in attendance. Only two real issues from the cities were discussed, revisiting Senate Bill 13, which most seem to recognize needs to be done. But there's some hesitancy to do it right now. They want to wait a couple of years to see how the current process is working, give it a chance to work. An issue was also brought up about the bed tax for hotels. It appears that Kansas law requires that if a person stays at a hotel for 28 days or more, the bed tax collected is refunded and they pay no bed tax going forward. Some hotels are booked 2 years in advance to take advantage of this law. This makes it so that those rooms are not available for anyone else, and regardless of whether they are actually used. There's some concerns with the cities that have hotels about that issue. This coming Saturday, November 5th, there is a blood drive at Resurrection Catholic Church on Woodlawn. So please contact Red Cross, make an appointment. The need for blood is still very critical. Election Day is next Tuesday, as others have said, November 8th. Early voting started today. I've gotten email comments, even though I'm not even in town, about how long the lines were today. So if somebody got it there and had a short line, they were very lucky from what I'm hearing. Because I've had 2 emails from citizens who said they were very long lines. So I'm glad to hear there were long lines. I'm sorry that people have to stand and wait to vote, but I am very pleased that people are getting out and voting. That early voting is available all this week from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. through Friday, then on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. After that, early voting is done at Bel Aire City Hall. You can still vote downtown, or you can come on November 8th and vote at your regular polling place. And please continue to support Los Canados and Dollar General at 45th and Woodlawn. They need our business. I understand there was a truck mishap there at that intersection earlier today. which wasn't cool. And hopefully they can get some good things to resolve on that. So that's all I have for today, Council President. I appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now ask for a city attorney report.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Just a couple of items. As Mayor said, the election day is coming up, and anytime that Bel Aire polls are open, signs within 200 feet of the election place will be removed. That's a part of the election law statutes. And then all signs must be removed 48 hours after the election. So any signs within the right of way, I'm sorry. And any signs that are authorized under our political campaigning code, those also must be removed within that 48-hour window. Finally, our social media policy is going to bring some changes that are going to be important to cleaning up our policy and ensuring that we can more easily align with the FCC requirements. Since we distribute our meetings on Facebook, YouTube, and the cable channel, we have to consider any burdens or costs that come with including captions wherever we present our meetings. And so the policy cleanup will kind of streamline some of those issues and get us in alignment with our FCC obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. On to our city manager's report.
Thank you, Council President. I've got a little more of a formal report tonight. I wanted to cover some things that we've had citizens in over the last probably month making comments on different items. And so I wanted to clear up some of those, answer some of those questions and such. First thing I wanted to talk about, it's the good thing is that the tree board's here because I wanted to brag on them a little bit. They're over here in the back row. But we've had a resident come in and was concerned about moss in the ponds and about trees and, environmental things that the city does. And so I wanted to kind of go over with our citizens that we do take those seriously. And there are certain things that we do here. For example, our city codes created a tree board, which was established in 1991. And you can see some of them there that are actually here tonight. And the duties, they create a tree plan for the city. They assist with the Arbor Day ceremony that typically we pay tribute to a citizen. And they help us with the Tree City USA designation. There's a lot of things that have to take place in order for us to get that, and they're a big part of that. Article 3 talks about tree planting and care. So our codes actually mention that planting is important, maintenance of importance. Our code enforcement officer, part of what they have to do is make sure that the trees are pruned, especially for safety hazard like sidewalks and things like that. And there's actually a list of recommended street trees that we get from KSU that is talked about in that article. So we've been a Tree City USA since 1996. Part of that, we have to do reports annually. And so in 2021, the city planted 27 trees, spent roughly $26,000 in tree work for 2021. And that's pruning, planting, watering, mulching, those types of things. And a lot of that's in-kind services, but we have to total up how much we actually spent maintaining our trees. As far as grasses, that was another comment. On all the city-owned ponds that we have, we keep a buffer between the edge of the pond and where we're mowing so that if fertilizer is used, there's that buffer to keep it from going within the ponds, because she was correct that that can cause moss and issues with the fish in the ponds. So that's something that we do on our lakes. We utilize drought-resistant grasses. So in Alley Park, there's 7 acres of buffalo grass that's there. Eagle Lake has got 7 acres of Bermuda, K31, fescue, and some buffalo. City Hall here, we have 5 acres of buffalo, and then Denise Park is all Bermuda. So we do utilize some of those different drought tolerant grasses and stuff. We do zero scaping, which eliminates the need for watering. So all of our entrance signs and the Eagle Lake Park sign are all zero scaped. So there's no watering or anything required. We use the Kansas Forest Service, South Central Kansas for best grasses to use. And then, of course, we try to reduce fertilization and pesticides by mulching our grass and things like that. So the city does take those things seriously, and we try to promote that. And our tree board is really key in helping us with our trees and such. The next thing I wanted to move into was especially that came out of our last meeting. There was a number of questions that came up. And so I wanted to address those. I think there was a little bit of confusion and some things like that. So one of the questions was what's happening in Arthur Heights. Well, we sent a letter on August 15th stating that there was overwhelming votes against doing anything there. And then we sent a follow-up letter on August 15th to let them know. So everyone that lives in Arthur Heights should know the results of the petitions and things like that. So the other questions we got on Aurora Park was, I thought a non-response was a no vote. Why'd the estimate change in the letters from 130 to 169? What was the legal standing for council to move forward with the resolution you were considering after the vote? And then why don't you use different gravel material? So wanted to go over those. So the first question is a non-response was a no vote. So really there were two different actions that council was considering and that the citizens were being posed with. And there are state statutes that allow you to have those two options for special assessment of public streets. So the first option, which is typical, and you see that a lot, is especially because of new developments, the developer or the landowner bring in a petition to have the roads paved, and you accept that petition and go through that process. The second option is where the city council can actually take the action to install paved streets. And then there's a process in that where if the majority of the homeowners sign a protest petition to stop that, then that stops the moving of that process. So there's two processes that can take place, and council actually did both of those or tried both of those. So in the first one, where it's citizen-led, what typically we do is the landowner or the developer brings it in because the developer owns all the lots. Well, in this situation in Aurora Park, every lot was sold and every individual owned a lot. So the council hired Garver to create the petitions to do that. And so the letters were sent out as well as the request for a no vote, which you can see down here. And I think there was some confusion as what was on that ballot. And the ballot was simple that I choose not to sign the included petition. That was all that was stated on that. And there was self-addressed stamped envelope back to the city. So we were requesting that either a petition or the no vote. And those were all sent out on July 5th. Another set was 29th, and August 15th sent several follow-up letters to try to get those back. So in this process, we needed 40 signed petitions for the project to move forward. So when in the public meeting, when I said that a no ballot was a no, a non-response was counted as a no, and so in other words, we had to have 40 signed petitions. And in that process, we didn't get it. So those people that didn't send their petitions back, we couldn't vote them as a yes. They didn't send a no ballot back. So that process stopped because there wasn't the required. So when the question was asked, if I don't return it, are you still going to move forward? No, we can't, because we had to have the signed petitions. So that was where the council then discussed, okay, so did those people not send their petition back because they wanted to vote no, or because they didn't care, or what was the reason why they didn't send them back? So that was the discussion that took place. So then council said, okay, the second option would be we could still move forward, we'd send out, you would pass a resolution, requires a public hearing, allow 20 days for a protest petition. So in this option, then the resolution would have been approved, which is what you considered. And then that would have required at least 51% of the owners of record and 51% of the owners making an approve it district sign the petition saying no. And that, because council did not approve that resolution, that process didn't stop. So, I think there was a little confusion of, well, we voted no, so how are you still moving forward? Well, they were two separate actions, and both of those are allowed within the codes or the state statutes. You tried the first one, didn't get the required 50% or the 51% either for it or against it. So then you went with the second option, which again, moved it forward, but required basically people to sign a petition saying no. So that's how those two options were considered, that they were both very different. And so when someone said, I thought I voted no, how are you moving forward? That was when the no votes and the yes, the petitions, that was one option. That one stopped. You tried option number 2, which is what you also stopped at the resolution. So again, here's where basically just what I said about the second required a protest. The first one, we had 14 that didn't return. So that's where you were not sure why they didn't return them. Question number 2 was about how did the estimate change? So when we first did the public comment or the public meeting, we had questions about, okay, in the petition it says, and this is what it says in the petition, that said estimated costs above may increase due to temporary interest financing costs incurred during the course of design, construction, also may be increased prorated 1%. So citizens say, well, how do we know what's that going to be? So what we did was when we sent out the second notice, we tried to estimate what those costs would be. So the 130 is the actual construction. And then when we include cost of issuance, guesstimating what the interest rate would be, we said probably then at that point, the max would be about 169. Again, these are just estimates. Construction could have came in at 120. And then when we factor in interest costs, it could have been 130 still. These are just estimates, but people wanted to know how do we know what that number is going to be? So that's why that changed. Is the second one we tried to think about what are the costs that could be added to it to make them comfortable with, okay, so probably the max would be 169, but it could be less. Again, we don't know. The next question is, what's the legal standing? State statutes have 2 options, and you could use one or both or none. And so these are the state statutes that give you the authority to use either one of those options. And the last question was, why not use different material? Those of us that have been around over the last 3 years have talked about these, but the different materials fix different issues. So the small gravel fixes the washboarding, the larger gravel fixes the potholes. It adds traction. The small gravel creates more dust. The large gravel requires more grading. There's just intricacies in the different materials and what they're there to do to fix. And of course, the small gravel fills up the ditches. The larger gravel gets chips on your paint, et cetera, et cetera. So that answers those questions. The thing that you need to know is after those letters went out, I was contacted by some homeowners that live in this area. And they said, we want our roads paved. And they said, if you look at where the petitions were, we all voted for it. Can we have our roads paved? And I talked to Garver and I said, can you pave? They wanted 40th and then North Parkwood. Can we do that separately? Because is that going to affect drainage and things like that? And Garver said, yeah, you can do that because they're at the high end. If they want to do this, they can do it. So we worked with Garver, put together a petition for this area. And if this holds true, the city may still pave this and special assess that because it can be done. You can divide it up. So I hope that answers any questions that our citizens may have had. Council have any questions for me about any of what I covered?
So Ty, by just doing the North Parkwood people, we would still go through a petition process.
Yes. So Garver's already created those petitions. They made this the benefit district, and if 51% of those lots come in, then I will submit those petitions to you, and then you will start the process to pave those.
Mr. President. Ty, I thought at one time we talked about that, and it was going to affect the drainage, that we couldn't do just a local area.
And that's, it depended on, for example, this would be hard to do because we're not doing anything here. We're not doing anything here. That was my concern. And that's why when I was asked that question, I went to Garver and said, can we do this without affecting drainage? And what they said was that because this is the higher portion, it's that the improvements they make along here will not negatively impact anything going down here because they're at the high side. So they said, yes, it can be done. And they said that if the citizens wanted to do that. Now, the key part is that they also wanted to make sure that, I think this is 40th, was done because all of these residents want to come down this road and then come in, so they don't want to have to drive up through the gravel this way.
Have you already sent the petitions out?
No.
Then why don't we include one more lot on the south there that voted yes, that corner? Or am I not reading the map right?
Like over here?
Yeah, it doesn't look like that's included.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I asked the engineers to create a benefit district that would work, and I don't know if this makes any change or not. I can certainly ask them.
Okay.
To tell them that, it appears that these people wanted it, and could we move down another lot?
Because I'd really hate to get that close to them if they want it and not get it done.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'll ask them. Okay, that concludes.
All right, thank you. Section 12, ordinances, resolutions, and final actions. First item is item A, consideration of the mayor's appointment of Emily Ryder to the Bel Aire Tree Board. The mayor has spoken with Emily about the responsibilities and is requesting confirmation to a 4-year term.
Mr. President,
Councilmember David.
I make a motion to confirm Emily Ryder to the mayor's, confirm Emily Ryder as the mayor's appointment to the Bel Aire Tree Board.
Second.
First and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Just a comment, Mr. President. Just a comment, Mr.
Yes,
President.
go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
This will fulfill the entire tree board. We will be fully staffed there with this appointment. So I appreciate Emily Ryder stepping up and look forward to having a full group there for a while. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have a first and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. The next item is consideration of a resolution establishing an Aurora Park Gravel Roads Task Force. So this was what our city manager just spoke on at our last meeting. We did discuss different options regarding moving forward with Aurora Park. And so this item is to consider the task force petition that is on our agenda. Any discussion on this item?
I know we heard somebody that didn't think we should do this, but I think we should move forward with this. It is going to be citizens of the area. Anybody that wants to can sign up to be on it. The mayor will approve 5 people, I think it is, or something like. Anyway, it's a small number. And I assume everybody can go to the meetings, even if it's just a small task force. I don't know, but I assume that. And I think this might give us a little bit of forward motion, which we've been lacking for years.
Mr.
Councilmember
President.
Hamburg.
So just for clarification, Mr. Lasher, we really can't do the task force without, or is it your opinion that we cannot do the task force without also entering into this consulting agreement with Garver?
The task force kind of stands on its own. The next item, I'll talk a little bit about that, but I think that's important from the city standpoint because there's a number of reasons that we're going to need someone to vet what's going to come out of that.
So I'll just add my comments on this item. I kind of think the idea of a city-sponsored task force for the Aurora Park neighborhood is a bad idea. Having the city sponsor and fund task forces that focus on individual neighborhoods doesn't make a lot of sense to me and sets a bad precedent, I think, in my opinion. I do recall, and I went back and looked it up, that back in August 21st of 2018, Ms. Penner talked to us about the Aurora Park task force that had been formed organically by the citizens of Aurora Park. So there is a task force that already exists for Aurora Park. I don't think we've heard from them in a while, but there's also not anything that would stop that task force from bringing information to us and sharing their thoughts with us. At this point, in addition to the maintenance that we typically do on these gravel roads, the taxpayers of Bel Aire have already paid for that engineering study to be done by Garver, where we've had pretty clear findings that the real permanent solution here is to pave the roads or to kind of keep doing what we're doing and fighting the issues. The taxpayers at large have funded the creation of these petitions and numerous public forums discussing and talking about this issue. So in my opinion, we've kind of invested enough in this issue at this point, and I'm not sure that we should do anything to continue investing in the gravel roads there beyond what we're already doing. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it.
I have to ask you, what in this resolution makes us spend money? I didn't see anything in there that I thought that would.
It's the next item, the Garver engineering, which in my opinion I believe would be necessary in order to make the task force effective. It's either we hire Garver to do some work with the task force, or we pay for staff time to spend time with this task force.
I think both Garver and our city personnel getting involved at this point is premature. So I would be against the next item, but didn't know we were talking about that yet.
So Mr. President, just some comments.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, this actually came from a citizen suggestion that we do something like this. I appreciate your comments that they did have an ad hoc kind of a task force doing things. The difference here is that we would get peripheral ideas from that group, but no formal, hey, we would like to do this, and please go forward with looking at this option. I think the difference here, this more formalizes it so that they can actually be empowered to say, this is what we as the citizens of Aurora Park would like to do, would like to look at for the roads. Would the city consider that? And then we would then at that point say, okay, what's the cost of that? Are you willing to pay that cost if it's significant? And I don't know, because I don't know what those recommendations will be. But if the cost is significant, we could say, okay, what's the cost of that? And we could get back with the citizens and say, are you willing to do a petition for these costs? So I think it'd be a way of more formally having that interaction and moving forward with this. And that's one of the reasons why I really caught or grabbed a hold of that one citizen suggestion for doing something like this, because it more formalizes and gets us to doing more real analysis instead of an idea thrown here, an idea thrown there that nobody really does anything with, or we do some things with, but nobody really knows what those are. So either way is not good. And we need to, I think we need to try to bring this around. it does put it on the citizens' shoulders to say, okay, what are we willing to do? Okay, because it's their property that they're having to deal with here. But that's the only comment I had. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any other discussion?
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember David.
make a motion to accept the resolution establishing an Aurora Park Gravel Roads Task Force for the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
We have a first by Councilmember David and a second by Councilmember Welch. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and I am voting against this. The motion passes 3-1. The next item is the consideration of the engineering consultant agreement with Garver for the Gravel Roads Task Force.
And like I kind of mentioned a minute ago, I don't think we should do this at this time until the task force has had a chance to get together, come up with some ideas, kind of write up some kind of report that we can let Garver address. I think it's way too early to get Garver involved at this point. So I'd like to at least table this until the task force is at some point, and I don't know how to define that point where they would need the help, but
Mr. President, can I ask that we hear from Mr. Lasher and his thoughts on this?
Yes. Mr. Lasher, do you have any comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate that. Two reasons why I'm very much supporting this. First reason is I know the number is kind of scary, but that's a not to exceed amount. I know, I think it's important that everybody feels comfortable with, okay, it's just going to cost us. What's the worst it's going to be? So I expect it to be less. It's more of an hourly cost is what we're going to sign up for. And we know it won't go above that. So I think it'll be less than that. Secondly, the key is that we need someone to vet what we're going to hear, because we've heard over the last several years, we've heard different ideas of use this material, use that material, grade it this way, use some dust treatment, use millings, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want our staff to be involved in vetting those, because, we've heard citizens from that area say that our staff doesn't know what they're doing, that they don't know how to grade, they don't know what kind of material. And so I don't think there's anything that our staff can bring to the table, because they're not trusted by or appreciated by the residents in that area. So I think it needs to be somebody from outside. The reason that I'm suggesting Garver is because they were the ones that actually did the drainage study. So they know what the issues are over there. And so we're going to need somebody to vet all of these issues, because when you hear a suggestion, there's going to be pieces that come with it. Who's going to apply it? How long does it last? What's the cost going to be? Who's going to pay for it? For example, and this just happened right after the last meeting, one of the citizens over there called me and said, I want to be involved in this. And I said, great. And they said, well, I've already done some research, and there are a couple things that I think we could look for. And I said, that's great. I said, bring those, but we're going to have an engineering firm look at these, because they could be from another state. And how is that going to work in Bel Aire? And this person said, well, yeah, one of them I looked at was in Phoenix and the other one is in Ohio. And I said, well, how do we get those people to come and do those applications here? Are there people that can do it here? And then he said, well, why don't your staff do it? Well, again, I am very reluctant to send our staff to do some type of application, because they're already accused they don't know what they're doing on the grader. If the application doesn't work, it's going to be the city's fault. So that's why I think we need someone from outside, not with the city, that will vet these suggestions and say, okay, this looks like it works great in Phoenix. Is it going to work here in Bel Aire? We have different weather. We have different soil conditions, all of that. It looks like it may work. Who's going to do the application? How much does that cost? We have to have them come from Phoenix to Bel Aire to do the application, or is there someone here that can do it? What's the cost going to be? What's the long term? One of our big concerns has always been with millings is you put millings down the first couple of years, that's great. And then as the heat melts it, and then it becomes hard, which is good. But then when you start having issues with it, you can't grade it anymore because you've got these huge chunks of asphalt now. So again, what's the long term? If this works great in 2 years, what's the long term going to be? So that's why I really am recommending that you bring in someone that can vet all these so that when you have the suggestions, you'll know what the cost is going to be. Is it really going to work here? What's the long term, short term benefits of it?
Thank you. Any other discussion from council members?
I guess to some extent, I agree with our city manager that I don't want city staff involved in this, but I also don't think we need to have Garver at every meeting until the task force actually comes up with some stuff, a preliminary report. It doesn't have to be a final report, but until they've got skin in the game, I don't want to be hiring Garver. So if the whole thing falls through and they can't get people on the task force, I don't want to contract with Garver. So, that's why I say at some point in the future, when they've got some multiple options that they have considered and they've documented and they've come up with some of the answers to your questions, how much is it going to cost? Where do we get the people? And I realized they probably didn't think of that question until you ask them. But I just think we're jumping the gun here.
Councilmember Hamburg.
Yeah, I'm torn because I hear what Mr. Lasher is saying. Ultimately, and we touched on this on the 18th, I acknowledge that the holistic permanent solution is to pave, but the support is not there at the moment for the entirety of Aurora Park. I liked the task force idea. And so in some ways, I know it's been done before, and just people that have been here longer, maybe it feels like we're going in circles. But to Councilmember Welch's point, I don't feel comfortable just yet spending money with Garver, committing money to Garver. It's something we can do if we get to that point. So I think I'm opposed to this as of right now.
I don't remember on the task force what kind of rules we laid out, but I'm restating the same thing for about the third time, I guess. But I would really like them to do something without involving anybody from the city before they at least get one report ready for somebody to look at.
I do recall from looking at the resolution that it does say that the task force will have the city manager or designee as a contact person. And I guess some of my concern is that some of the charter is to do things like determine what amount of dust is acceptable and how to measure that. That's a very technical thing that we've tasked this task force to do. And I feel like some sort of engineering capability is going to be necessary in order to meet some of these objectives that we've laid out for this task force. So I don't necessarily support the task force and I voted against it. But now that we're going to have the task force, I'm struggling with the idea of should we have the engineering firm to help or not? I'm not sure that the task force can meet its objectives without the engineering firm, but I'm also really against continuing to pour money into this issue that we've studied already with an exhaustive engineering study of the area. I'll ask our city attorney, are we allowed, can we have public comment at this time?
We do not have public comment, but the chair does have the right to, the chair controls the floor. So there's no public comment unless the chair were to decide to acknowledge somebody.
Okay. We'll invite Ms. Penner.
We voted paved streets. I'm sorry, the rest of our neighborhood cannot want to live up to standards today. Thank you, council.
Any
Mr.
other?
President, can you ask Ms. Penner to speak in the microphone? I could not hear what she said.
I'm
She
sorry,
has
Mr.
left.
Mayor, Ms. Penner has left the audit or the council chamber.
Mr. Chair, I would remind the chair, there's a point of order for any time someone speaks out of turn without acknowledgement of the floor.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion from council members on this, or I could entertain a motion?
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember David.
I'll make a motion to table an engineering consultant agreement with Garver for Gravel Roads Task Force and authorize the city manager to sign.
We don't need a signature, do we?
Yeah.
Do we have a date to table to or some event? I would suggest that we table it until the first a preliminary document is created.
That was my thought as well.
Do you
I
want to
guess we
amend
could
your?
amend it. I'll amend it to as stated.
So there's a motion on the table to table the engineering consulting agreement with Garver until the task force has a preliminary recommendation.
I would second that.
And there's a second by Councilmember Welch. Any discussion on this item? Does our mayor or city manager have any further comment on this?
No, I think that's a good compromise. I like that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just let everybody know that the task force shall provide a presentation or report to council outlining the recommendations on or before October 30th, 2023. So this report is tabled until they give the report, but ultimately no later than October 30th, 2023.
Can we ask Mr. David to clarify if that was the intent of his motion?
I think that's a good date. Thank you for pointing that out. October 30th, 2023, no later than.
I'll second the amendment to no later than October, whatever the date was.
Thank you. All right, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item D is consideration of terminating the consulting services agreement with the Lloyd Group. The Lloyd Group was hired to complete a financial audit of CCUA. Unfortunately, the firm has been extremely busy and was waiting for Burns and McDonnell performance audit to be completed before starting the financial audit. Staff felt both the financial audit and performance audit could be completed during the same time period. As a result, both Scott and staff have agreed it was best for the Lloyd Group to bow out and allow another firm to take over the financial audit. Do we have any questions for Ty on this item?
We have not spent any money on this yet, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I will make a motion to approve the termination of the consulting service agreement with the Lloyd Group LLC and authorize the president to sign.
Second.
Have a first and a second to approve the termination. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item E is consideration of a proposal from Burns and McDonnell for CCUA cost sharing evaluation. So after working with Burns and McDonnell for several months on the performance audit of the CCUA, staff felt their financial division could easily complete the financial audit while the performance audit is being finalized. Dave Newman with Burns and McDonnell is here to share his experience and answer any questions.
Good evening, Mayor, Council President, and Council. My name is Dave Nauman. I'm a project manager at Burns & McDonnell, and I'd be responsible. Thank you. I thought that sounded a little weird. I'll start over. Mr. Mayor, Council President, and Council, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Dave Nauman. I am a project manager at Burns & McDonnell in our management consulting division. I'd like to just give you a few moments of time to talk about my background and then what we hope to accomplish out of the proposed study. I specialize in water and sewer, financial and rate consulting, municipal utilities in particular. I've got about 30 years of experience, 11 of which has been at Burns & Mac in the most recent years. I lead our municipal water and sewer rate practice and would be responsible for executing this study. I frequently get involved in cost of service studies, so determining a reasonable allocation of cost and alignment with the use of the system, which then forms the basis for fair and equitable rates. I've been involved in true-ups and helping to reconcile disputes around cost sharing in prior utilities. And I also frequently collaborate with my engineering brethren, and I'm pleased that Brian Meyer is here with me tonight. I think you're familiar with him. We're proposing to evaluate the cost sharing arrangement with CCUA and Park City. And it really comes down to three primary components. The first is taking a detailed look at the existing agreements, the bond documents, the foundation for the current cost sharing arrangement. As a part of that, we will look into history as to the total cost annually of the two facilities and the costs that have been assigned to Bel Aire and Park City historically, along with the flows associated with those services. We're also going to look forward. So we know that the wastewater utility is looking at some potentially substantial capital improvements. It could change operating costs. When we look at cost sharing like this, it's important to know where you're headed. And so we will look forward about 5 years to understand what the future state looks like as well. And so that really is the foundation for the assessment. We will use industry protocols for assigning cost at the water treatment plant and the sewer treatment facility to Bel Aire and Park City on the basis of their use of the system. And it's not just flow that matters in those instances. For wastewater, for instance, the relative strength of what's discharged to the system also matters. On the water side, peak demand matters. It's not just the total demand for the year, it's how high is the peak, because that drives cost as well. So we'll take a detailed look at the costs of the system and how they could be assigned to each of the participants in the system and come back with some findings and recommendations around alternate approaches to cost recovery. From a timing standpoint, we hope to be materially complete by end of this year. We are dependent on a little bit of data that's in progress. We need to know the strengths of the wastewater. That sampling, I think, will be available in December. And then I think some recommendations around capital improvements are also pending. So all of that information will feed into this analysis. But assuming it's received timely, we would hope to be back to you in a couple of months. So that's all I had prepared. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, Mr. President, I do have some questions for Mr. Nauman.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that we've done in the TAC and the mayors agreed to a timeline of actions that we were going to do. And one of the critical dates of that timeline is 12/31 of 2022, that we were going to have the audit responses provided to us by that date. In the proposal that I saw that you had sent us, that was more of a TBD. But I want to encourage you that we really need to hit that date, because we also have in that timeline a January 31 of 2023 that we need to have hammered out with our sister city, Park City, of a financial arrangement so that we can move forward with any construction programs to expand the wastewater facility. Those are timelines that we've hammered out, and everyone has agreed to, even the CCUA board, and we really need to try to see what we can do to make that happen. I think you're going to have the results from the effluent or the influent test here within the next week or so, because those tests have already been pulled and they're in the lab right now. So I just want to see if you think that there is any way we can really get a firm commitment that we could have not just an idea, but a real presentation proposal by the end of the year.
That would be my intent. And the dependencies we have on the data that's in development, it's encouraging that they're a little closer than I had hoped. So assuming that happens, yes, we'll be with you at the end of the year.
Okay. And then my other concern is that we go, and maybe you're already doing this, but I saw a date in the proposal of 2015 as a start date. These bond documents predate that. And there are some things that I understand were in those original bond documents that affect things like Park City putting money in instead of financing. That would affect, obviously, they should be credited with that. And then that Bel Aire actually purchased a water tower in one of those bond documents, which obviously Bel Aire has a responsibility to pay for that. We can't ask Park City to pay for that. So I just want to make sure that we were really going back to ground zero on this, because bonds have been replaced with other bonds, which have been replaced with other bonds, which makes the thing a little really messy. And I get that. That's why we need an expert like you to be able to go through that and say, okay, what is the real story here today? So does that make sense to you? I just want to make sure that we're really going back to the original bond documents.
Yes, it makes sense. We will go back to the original documents and develop an understanding of how things have evolved over time. The 2015 and forward, from a cost standpoint, was really just trying to get to information we thought was readily available. But that doesn't mean that we won't be looking at the foundation for cost responsibility. So we can go back to the beginning of time and the historical cost if that information is available. But the methodology will be rooted in all of those agreements over time.
I wasn't so concerned about getting all those costs back there, but make sure that we didn't miss some significant issue that affects the current status. Those purchase of assets and things that were financed for Bel Aire is certainly something that needs to be certainly considered, and also Park City's upfront expenses. So those are some of the issues, and I don't know the details of those. I just know that those things happen, and I don't know if there are other assets that were purchased by either city that may have been in those bonds that need to be given consideration as well.
Understood.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the only questions I had, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to add that I also was kind of concerned about the schedule due to the timeline, and I appreciate that there are some constraints out of your control that can affect that timeline. So my ask would be, as you go along, if you hit those constraints, please make us aware of that promptly so that we can do whatever we can as council members, as CCUA board members, to make sure the right information is getting into your hands so that this can progress on the timeline that both the city and the CCUA board have agreed to. And so both on constraints, and then I think it would be great if you guys could give us some updates as you go along in this process. If the first time we hear from you is those draft reports on December 19th, that might not be great. So some brief updates as you go along, as you hit those major milestones and delivery dates would be very appreciated. Any other discussion from council members? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember Hamburger.
I make a motion that we accept the proposal from Burns and McDonnell for CCUA cost sharing evaluation and authorize the council president to sign.
I'll second.
We have a first by Councilmember Hamburg and a second by Councilmember David. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item F is consideration of an agreement for professional services with Baughman Engineering and Design and Construction Observation Services for the 12-inch water main extension to serve the Homestead Senior Landing and the amount of $30,000. The staff and the developer have been involved in this project and have requested that they continue. The cost for these services will be spread as special assessments to the benefiting area. Anne is here to answer any questions.
A little bit about this project. The specific water main need for the Homestead Senior Living is just that north piece. You'll see it does extend into the large cul-de-sac for the Prairie Preserve. That the purpose of that is to make sure those water lines loop. Looping water lines get much better turnover in the water. If the water stays in a certain place for too long, it becomes stagnant. It also forces our city staff to go out and flush the water lines every so often, usually every couple of weeks, to make sure that the chlorine residual is kept fresh, the water is kept fresh. There's multiple reasons for that. So this is extending a little bit further beyond what would be strictly needed for the development itself. That wasn't my request because I do want those water lines to loop. When we had initially installed the water main for the Prairie Preserve, it was meant for an eventual connection along Oliver. And looking at the sizes of the water mains, the 12-inch was deemed appropriate because that is a similar size to what's going around in other areas. A lot of our water mains that are along the main lines or the main streets are 16-inch, but since this water main would not extend further, it already loops. We don't have a need for a 16-inch to go all the way down Oliver to 37th or further. Then that is why I chose the 12.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any questions for Ann?
Yeah, Council President, I do have a question for Ann. I know that Randall, the former CCUA manager, expressed concern about the taps of the water main coming up 53rd Street. Are we, is this going to help resolve any of those concerns?
PEC, as part of their water and sewer master plan study, is looking into that specific concern. Having this 12-inch there will provide an alternate route to get to the tower. Without having that PEC study specifically, I cannot say whether this is going to resolve those issues, have any detrimental effect, or have some detrimental effect. Unfortunately, that's something that's going to have to wait until that PEC study has been completed. I did make them aware of this additional connection. I do know that having the loop is much better than not having a loop. So that was kind of my thoughts moving forward with this. Unfortunately, with the development in the area, we cannot just say, no, you need to wait until this study is done. So,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
yes, you're welcome.
Do we know when, do we have an update on when that study will be completed? Is it pretty close?
It's probably going to be towards the early springtime of next year. I do not have a specific date. April sticks in my mind, but that's a lot of, there's a lot of other things that are floating around there. So I wouldn't be very pinpointing on that date, but it should be early next year. We have had a preliminary meeting with them. They are gathering information, getting all of the information that we have sent put into an organized fashion and updating the GIS spreadsheet so they can start building their model off of that GIS.
Is there any more targeted analysis that we should request that they do right now on this issue before we move forward with it?
There's really nothing that can be done analysis wise until they get their GIS model built and the model in their whatever analysis software they're using. That's the piece that's going to take the longest. So I don't think that we can really wait. I can certainly, I would suggest we go ahead and have Boffin go ahead and design this because I don't think sizes are going to change. If any sizes do change, it would go down. That would not affect the overall design. That's a very simple change in bidding documents. Put it at 10-inch instead of 12 or whatever instead of 12. That's a very simple change. I would have them go ahead so we can work with PEC and say, how long do you think it's going to take to get an analysis in this area done? And we can certainly see if that's possible before it bids. But I know Homestead has been at my door. I need help. I need help. I need help. So they're really interested in moving forward as quick as possible.
No, completely understand that. I think that's a good recommendation, and I know they want to move forward, but you have to be mindful of the broader implications of the water system. And so I want to make sure we're not putting the whole system at risk by
Yes.
moving forward with this development.
100%.
Any other discussion on this?
Mr. Council President.
Councilmember David.
Make a motion to approve the agreement for professional services with Baumann for engineering, design, and construction observation services for the 12-inch water main extension to serve Homestead Senior Landing, the amount of $30,000, and authorize the city manager to sign.
I will second. So we do have a motion with a first and a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing no discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item G is consideration of a revised use of City Hall facilities policy. Due to the amount of staff time required to manage City Hall rentals and the minimum amount of revenue generated by them, the 2023 fee schedule removed City Hall rentals. Staff has revised the use of the City Hall facilities policy to no private rentals. However, use by other groups are still permitted as requested by the governing body. Are there any questions for the city manager or city attorney on the revised policy?
Mr. President, I do have a comment about this. I
ahead.
was concerned about us going this direction with the City Hall facility because it takes out of the city a venue for community events that are not necessarily city sponsored. And a discussion with Mr. Lasher, he said we still have the rec center available. So I guess I'm kind of okay with this because we have the rec center available, but I think it's important that communities have these abilities to have these community centers for things that aren't just city functions. And I think almost all cities have them of some sort. We will still have the rec center, so I'm kind of okay with it, but I was a little concerned about that.
Thank you for those comments. I do remember we discussed this, I think at some amount of length when we discussed the fee schedule. And I remember some unique concerns related to this venue being part of City Hall and having the events and the event venue be part of City Hall with other functions going on and the specific setup that we have here from a security perspective. So I am in favor of this. I think it makes sense, but I am glad that we're going to continue to have the rec center available. Are there any other comments or questions from council members, or would our city manager like to add anything?
No, I don't have anything. As the mayor mentioned, that we still have the rec center. The one thing that they do differently out there is they have part-time staff. And so their part-time staff, whenever they rent it, are there at the facility. So they can help out, make sure everything gets cleaned up, those things. And we don't have that here at City Hall. And of course, the biggest issue that the concern I had was the security of it, of City Hall itself, and some of the things that have happened in the past that makes me a little nervous. So thank you.
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember Hamburger.
I make a motion to approve the revised use of City Hall facilities policy as presented and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
We do have a motion with the first and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item H is consideration of the revised Bel Aire Media Policy 2022. Since the last revision date of the policy, the city has added YouTube and other social media tools. Staff want to address those changes and has revised the policy with up-to-date language based on our current communications. Our city attorney referenced this in her report, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions that we have on this item.
I didn't send this in earlier, but there are some problems with the numbering and the wording in some sections, particularly E3 is followed by E2. And that paragraph to me begs for commas or something.
Councilmember Welch, can you provide more context on what you're looking at there? Or repeat your comment for me?
Well, under platforms, 3E, and that's
Community
page 2.
standards.
Yeah, you'll see there's a subsection III, and if you scroll on down, there's a subsection II. So clearly that's wrong. And that paragraph to me is the one that I think it needs some help, and I can't tell you right now what I think should be done to it because I didn't totally understand the paragraph the way it was written.
If I can help with that paragraph, I think the intent there was to reference like a disclaimer that would go, so everything after, the following notice shall be provided along with the comment policy above. That language after that, as I'm kind of scanning it, would be kind of like cut and pasted into certain sections of the website or other social media tools. Just as a disclaimer. Read through it real quick.
Well, it could just be my mind that can't fathom it. If everybody else understands it, then we just need to change it to,
I do think this statement that reads, the City of Bel Aire platform is for providing the residents and vendors of the city, and not intended to create a public forum it's missing something. There's
Yeah,
something about that sentence
did.
that's
This is
not
the comments.
complete.
Maybe let's kind of say platform is for providing city residents, maybe.
well, I thought maybe it was providing the city, comma, the residents and vendors of the city. That's why I said it needs help, and I'm not sure what to tell you to do to it.
Mhm. I can go through it and I can work with our communications director and kind of thin it out if you want to give me that. And we can either bring it back or you can approve it as amended, asking the attorney and the department director to work through amending the language there. Or if you want to see it, we can bring it back next month. You can table it. So whatever works best for you.
Next month or next meeting?
Oh, next meeting.
I would be up to tabling it till the next meeting. I don't know what the other members feel like.
Councilmember.
Hamburg.
Yeah, Ms. Kelly, I just had a quick, bigger question here. Sometimes not necessarily in Bel Aire, but on other cities, police department websites or government social media, sometimes people will say, "You just leave my comment," or why are you guys doing this? So just so I understand, I'm not asking you to cite cases or anything, but when folks are up here at our podium working under our meeting guidelines for public comment, the First Amendment is in place. When we say we have the right, we have these policies, and if you're off topic, if you're doing any of these things, we have the right to remove you. That's obviously their First Amendment isn't in place there because it's not intended to make a public forum. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're exactly right. That the media policy is intended to provide the public information. It's the city's, kind of like the city might send mailers. That's the intent of it. There's comment allowed, but it's not the goal. It's not the main objective of our social media pages and sites. So comments are not thereby the primary thing. Like here, public comment is the substance. So you have to allow that comment on our social media sites. The intent is to just get information out. So the comments there can be restricted in a far more broad way than they can at the forum.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments on the policy?
Mr. President, I'll make a
Councilor-
motion to table the City of Bel Aire Media Policy 2022 until the next council meeting.
Second.
A first and a second to table the Bel Aire media policy. Is there any further discussion? See no further discussion. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item 13 on the agenda is executive session. Does anyone have the need for an executive session? Looks like there's no need for an executive session. Item 14 is discussion and future issues. The monthly workshop is regularly scheduled for November 8th at 6:30 p.m. There has been some comments shared that is election day, and potentially we should discuss on if it makes sense to continue the workshop for that day or potentially move it to Wednesday, November 9th, I think was the mayor's suggestion. What are the council's thoughts on that?
I think we should move it later or to the next day. Do we have discussion items for that workshop?
Do we have a proposed agenda for the council workshop?
Yes, the major one that you'll be discussing is the proposed revised salary schedule.
Okay.
Okay, so we can't just ditch it.
Oh, sorry.
Is there anything else that should be on the agenda?
This is a minor issue, but I would like the city attorney to be able to take a few minutes at that council workshop and explain why we were not able to get our term limits on the ballot, but the school board was able to get their question on the ballot, because it looks like it's very similar to me.
I can look into that.
Thank you.
So I heard a proposal for moving it later on November 8th. There's a proposal, I think it was the mayor's proposal from my notes, to move it to Wednesday, November 9th. Either day works for me personally.
Yeah, I'm personally indifferent.
Ditto, I can do either.
I'm available for a limited time on the 9th, so I would just ask that you would give me a slot of like first slot if possible. If we do it on the 9th, if we do it on the 8th, I'm available anytime.
Does our city manager have any thoughts?
No, I'm available both.
nights.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it just so
See-
happens, Council President, it so happens that all election days are on Tuesdays and all of our council meetings are on Tuesdays. So we're always going to run into this,
Yep.
this problem, and it might be, it's not a big issue, but it might be wise for us to consider maybe making our policy to just automatically move those off of election days. But like I said, it's not a big deal, but it's always a conflict every time.
Yeah, I know in the past we've had some noise issues as a result of having our workshops or meetings on election day, but I don't think it's been a huge issue. We could certainly still, I think, have it without any issues.
I think the last election, that was an issue because the lines were so long and people were still here late. And before that, I don't think it's been that way. And I don't know why this year is getting such a increase in turnout. I'm all for that. I'm glad people are voting, but I'd like to understand what happened.
Yeah, so I guess my thoughts on it at this point, I think we should just kind of leave it at the regularly scheduled time and move forward with it on the 8th at 6:30.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with that? Mr. Mayor, are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, last item on the agenda is adjournment.
I'll
I
make a
think you
motion
need to
to
discuss it.
adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on adjournment. Is there any discussion?
I don't think it's fair the mayor left already.
All right. Oh, no.
No,
he's
I'm still here.
All right.
Caught him.
Motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes 4-0. We are adjourned.
Was it